as you outlined for us, a major shift for this company then. Rene, Haas, thank you very much indeed for your time. You've gone from a company selling IP, selling the blueprints to your customers, to a company now that for the first time in its history will be designing and making chips. It's a significant moment. How significant is it, and why move in this direction?
Thank you, Tom. It is a very big day for ARM. There's no doubt about that. We've been an IP provider since we started. We started selling compute subsystems a few years ago, which was sort of the next step, but it's not a physical thing. But as we grew into the CSS business, we had customers that kept asking for more and more and more. And here we are today with ARM's first chip product, the ARM AGI CPU, which Meta is our lead partner for, and Meta asked us to do it with them, so we did.
Talk to me about Meta and the partnership then. One of your customers, OpenAI, also a customer. What are the commitments from Meta, from OpenAI to take this chip on board? When do you start shipping?
So as Mohammed said, it's available now, and we'll start shipping at the end of this year. We're not saying anything publicly about the volumes associated with it, but they are material enough that we have to start talking about the product because it's going to start showing up on our revenue this year.
The revenue starts showing up this year, and in your presentation earlier here in San Francisco, you talked about potentially just this one revenue stream, just this one part of the business, potentially $100 billion by 2030. Talk us through how you get to that $100 billion.
So we're looking here then, Tom, at the general purpose CPU TAM, which today in 2026 is about $60 billion, $70 billion, depending on your maths. I talked about agentic AI driving a 4x CPU workload even today. So $60 billion going to $100 billion by the end of the decade in terms of market opportunity is not really that much of a stretch.
How much of this is about that huge demand we're seeing, particularly here in Silicon Valley, for agentic AI? How much of this is aligned to that shift?
I think you have something key that's underpinning everything, and that's the demand for compute, period. And compute has been perceived in AI about just generating tokens. But those tokens need to be distributed, managed, orchestrated, scheduled. That's all work that only CPUs can do. So the more and more compute that drives agentic AI drives huge, huge CPU demand, which is great for the product we just announced today.
The other number that you announced was $1 trillion, and that's the entire business by 2030. You were a $4 billion revenue company in 2025, and you're looking at $1 trillion potentially by 2030. Just unpack that for us. How do you get to $1 trillion potentially by 2030?
Yeah, so what I showed there was a TAM, total available market, of $1 trillion by the end of the decade. And I showed a picture that had some other die photographs of things that we could do with the tagline, we're not stopping here. So more to come, but today is all about the ARM AGI CPU.
More to come. So you have the pipeline of CPUs. Do you move into GPUs? What else is involved in more to come?
The compute demand for AI is off the charts, and ARM is at the heart of literally every AI compute workload. So we have a lot of different ways to go address that.
Can you give me some detail, Rene, in terms of revenues in the next 12 to 24 months coming from this product?
So we're going to be talking about it a little bit later, but the market potential for this product is game-changing for the company. It puts us in a whole different zip code relative to the size of market we can address and the kind of revenues we can drive from it.
Does it come at the cost of margins? The spend on R&D, is that the pain point potentially?
So one of the things to think about when you get into the chip business is the gross margin percentage may be less, but the gross margin dollars may be much, much larger. So if you think about, let's use the TAM example. $3 billion TAM, 95% gross margin, you'd call that $2.8 billion. Take a $100 billion TAM and apply a 50% gross margin, you're at $50 billion. So $50 billion of gross margin versus slightly under 3. So percentages less, dollars much, much, much more.
The critics might say the hyperscalers are doing custom silicon. Jensen Huang talked about CPUs, their own CPUs, that maybe ARM is late to the game. Are you late on this?
No, I don't think we're late at all. And I think if you just look at what we've seen with agentic AI and the fact that CPUs are being seen again as first-class customers, it's a proof point that there is going to be huge demand for this product. And by the way, Tom, it's not just in the data center. As I talked about, ARM is the heart of physical AI. We're the heart of autonomous vehicles. We're at the heart of mobile phones, edge devices that fit inside your ear, wearables. That all needs compute. in a very big way with AI.
This is bad news for Intel, presumably.
I don't know if it's bad news for Intel. I think it's good news for the market that really needs to have extra performance at the same power. So I think for customers who need that extra performance but don't want to spend more in power, it's really good for them.
There was a time when ARM was characterized as the Switzerland of the semiconductor industry, neutrality. Can you really claim to be neutral now that you have your own fully designed manufactured chip?
I think so. The market and the world is complicated relative to customers who compete with each other. You've got Google building phones, yet Samsung is a large Android customer. You've got Microsoft building laptops for things like Surface, yet you've got companies like HP building the same. The thing to keep in mind is why ARM building chips is beneficial is that it lifts all boats for the ecosystem. The better the software is on ARM, anyone building an ARM-based chip can benefit from that opportunity.
At GTC, Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, at their annual conference outlined the picture for inference, and they've obviously bought the IP and the licensing around Grok, which plays a big role in inference, the way we interact with these models, the questions and the answers. Do we move now from a place where this is less about training and more about inference? And what does that mean? Does that mean more demand for your products or less demand as we start to shift from training to inference?
Well, I think that the shift to training the shift to inference from training is an intellectually obvious one, right? The more models that are trained, the more sophisticated they are, the greater the demand to actually use them. So as workloads shift more and more to needing inference, I think, again, all boats go up. I think we're not done yet with training by any stretch of imagination, but with inference, you're really servicing the models that have been created. So I think both demands go up, which again is good for ARM.
I want to zoom out a little bit to what's happening geopolitically. The Middle East, the war in Iran. What is that supply chain impact having on your customers in terms of their ability to operate in this environment?
I've not heard anything yet. I've read about things in the news about that space, but when I think about customers coming to us or looking at our financials and saying, oh my gosh, we're going to see some impact due to what's going on in the Middle East, we're not seeing it.
When it comes to memory, high bandwidth memory, NAND, and other parts of the memory space, massive supply shortages, do you see a contraction of the smartphone market this year?
Memory is going to be tough to get, period. I think it's going to be a driver of growth for the industry, but to the point we were talking about, more and more of these inference models, more and more compute, means demand for a lot of memory. So do I think smartphones are going to go down? I don't have a good projection on what that looks like, but I do think that the memory supply cycle is going to be pretty tight.
It remains pretty tight until, when do you see that tightness in particularly HBM memory, high bandwidth memory tightness? When do you see that being resolved?
Yeah,
how many more years of this?
I think the memory market is going to be a tough market if you listen to SK Hynix or Samsung or Micron. The next year to 18 months, I think it's going to be quite supply constrained. Okay.
Can we conclude? Is it fair to conclude that we're going to see smartphone prices generally go up and fewer products as a result of this, at least in the short to medium term?
Yeah, I've not seen that yet, Tom. I think for what I've seen for ARM is we've had a lot of questions about it. How is our business going to be impacted by the memory issue with smartphones? And because we've gone to CSS and much higher royalty rates, even a reduction of 15 to 20% in smartphone volume has probably a 1 to 2% impact on our royalties, and that's just because of the mix of where we play. So right now, as ARM's business is going, we're not seeing it, and we've modeled in some bearish figures.
You, in your role, you have to be looking to the future, and I know you do this, Rene, years out. Jensen Huang has talked about this. Elon Musk has talked about this. Jeff Bezos has talked about this. Data centers in space. Do you take that seriously, Rene? And are you and the team looking maybe at servicing at some point with your CPUs, with your architecture, data centers in space?
I think it's quite real. There's some huge benefits you get from it. One of the obvious ones just being power. The benefits you get from power are quite profound. Now, when you think about putting things in space, swapping out boards that have gone bad, a system that needs to be made redundant because something's not working, obviously all those issues come into play. And then there's obviously issues around latency. Can you get the performance you need? But do I think we'll see data centers in space someday? Absolutely.
And I want to loop it back.
We can play there.
You can play there. You can play in data centers in space. There we go. There we go. The ambition remains. Another question on data centers, given what we're seeing in the Middle East. We've seen data centers run and owned by the likes of Amazon in the Middle East being targeted, being impacted. Do we need to rethink security around data centers? Is that a topic that's being discussed in the industry?
I think it is, and yes, for sure. When you think about the scale of these data centers and the value of the intellectual property inside, the amount of compute that it services, absolutely. If you go to data centers in North America, for example, they are very heavily security. They are security devices and personnel around all these data centers. So certainly it's something that has to be done.